Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 12, Episode 8 of our weekly Q&A content. It's a video, it's a podcast. You probably already know how to get at them.
It's all things to all people.
If you are watching the video, this is the season of sort of our favorites, right?
Yeah, old favorites.
Showing off people that we love, that we don't necessarily, or that we haven't had as much time to look at when we were too busy playing with old challenge characters that are just now coming back into availability.
Yeah.
And so who are we looking at this week?
We're looking at Ares. I'm sort of torn because I'm getting to the point where I think we've really hit all the old favorites. There's some other teams that we like, and a part of me feels like, it'd be too short a season to just do this and maybe one other team.
Well, there are no rules.
There are no rules. So we could revisit some of them, especially the ones that are easy to grind a little bit. I mean, there's nobody really quite as fast as the Flashpoint team, and there's nobody really quite as fun to me as the Static Rebirth Raven team, where we're actually sort of, even though we use Hawkgirl and Rebirth Raven on a lot of teams for support to really let one character shine, the third character shine.
Yeah.
Static really sort of opens up Rebirth Raven in a way that other characters do not.
Mm-hmm.
So Ares. All right, so Ares was sort of the original. He was the original multiplayer reward, and he was also the original glass cannon nuke.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, so we've played around with a lot of minor variations of this team. You can see that in our Ares playlist, and one of the earliest versions had Ares, Batgirl, and Regime Killer Frost.
Yeah.
And why that was interesting was because that was before Tantu Totem. So if you had 2 bars of power, you needed to make it count. So maximizing splash damage was important. That you could do with his Blade of the War God. I think that was also before Fourth World Gear set. So you need to save him because you could not do what we're doing in this fight, which is repeated SP Special 2 nukes. So so there's different things you can play around with, and what the biggest considerations are. First is team composition. And I think at this stage of the game, Hawkgirl is not negotiable, mainly because of opponents with revives. Ares Special 2 is 1 hit. I mean, you can make it work without Hawkgirl, but you're just going to make your fights a lot harder. Ares Special 2 is 1 hit. If the opponent survives, right, because of revives, because of super high stats, because your Special 2 doesn't crit, you need to get Ares out of trouble. Bring in someone quickly who can either do something, or sorry, not who can do something, either damage or just killing time. And Hawkgirl's gears almost don't matter because she's here for her passive. She's probably most useful as a tank, which is why she has Astro Harness. It's hard to make her a big offensive threat.
Yeah, and you can sort of, with Astro Harness, make basically anybody into a useful enough tank.
Right.
Regardless of how much health they even have, really. As long as you have above the minimum threshold of getting sort of knocked out so fast that you're blazing past invulns.
Yeah. So the other team member is Batgirl. She's important because there's 2 gears basically that give you 1 bar or almost 1 bar of power when you tag in. And you need to decide if Ares will have both of them so that every time his Special 2 doesn't knock out the opponent and you need to tag him out, whether you need to decide whether he'll come back in immediately with 2 bars or whether you're going to have to work a little bit. So Batgirl's passive of giving him bar power lets us have the flexibility of giving Batgirl Master's Death card. Mm-hmm. And that means Batgirl becomes a significant damage dealer every time she tags in to give Ares a break instead of just a time waster.
Yeah.
One of the considerations, I guess, with Batgirl is that you can give her Necron Scythe or Cloak of Destiny. And because Master's Death card renders Cloak of Destiny's tag and stun useless, it doesn't last for her to take advantage of it. Necron Scythe becomes sort of the better consideration because it's got the free revive if Batgirl knocks out the opponent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a bit of a toss-up. You could use either. Just recognize that you're not going to get the stun on tag, and even on the, I think 1 in 5, 20% chance that it actually triggers.
Yeah.
So that was the first part, is team composition. Second part is gear choices. So Tantu Totem on Ares is mandatory if we're going to really lean into a Special 2. We need his power back to do it a quick 3 times if the enemy has no revives. And Fourth World Mace is there because it has Special 2 effects, including splash damage. Boost is Special 2. I think there's power drain on it too. And we tried Blade of the War God as an alternative for more splash damage, or in addition to, for just even more splash damage. But we started appreciating, because the splash damage on Blade of War God, I think, is 20%. But we started appreciating Enchantress Companion Gear more because it enhances Ares special 2 damage with the skulls coming in after. It doesn't do splash damage against both opponents, but you only get that once, right? Once you've knocked out one, you're still only doing splash damage on one opponent. I think there's 10% per skull, so that's 3 skulls, 30% boost, which is almost as good as 220% and definitely better than 120% boost with a splash. And it has the added benefit of protecting Ares from an opponent that revives and has power to hit us back, or a new opponent, more importantly, a new opponent that tags in and has a tag in effect, and it buys us time to tag him out and bring in a teammate that can handle the opponent. And that could easily be Hawkgirl with her Astro Harness to eat super, or Batgirl with her Master's Death Cart, because while the sort of the I know they're not supposed to, there's got to be some word for it. I never really can think of anything. The little bits of thing that come in that to hit
debris.
The debris that hits the opponent, because that can, if you time it right, if you come in too early and the opponent sort of is not in the middle of getting hit by that, they can drop a special on you. But if you're doing it, if you time it right, you not only can avoid their special or delay their special, you can do shatter some, because of the way we've loaded out, we've geared up Batgirl, we can destroy their gears at the same time. I mean, it takes a bit more planning to use this team than previously, which you can see in our playlists when revives did not exist. But on the flip side, you actually can do the special 2s more often, because now there are Tantu totems to stick on your team and get your power back immediately.
Yeah.
I love this team. Like, Ares was, I think, the first really sort of, I don't want to say game changer, because I think that word gets you overused a lot, and I don't know that he's necessarily a game changer, but it was a way to really, you could see the way the game was changing, not just from power creep, but from the different kind of specials and passives that were being introduced. And that combination of Ares' passive, where he is able to, I think it's based on his passive, right? That Godsmack is unblockable, basically.
Yeah.
Even though the description isn't that it should be unblockable, that makes it unblockable. The opponent is standing and they can't block if the opponent is still standing after the special 2. So if they somehow make it past, if they got a revive, or your special 2 doesn't crit and the opponent is still standing, then they've got that little red glow on them to show you that they can't block, at least until that red glow is gone. Super fun. And I think you could get away with not giving Master's Death Card to Batgirl, but then she becomes so much less useful as a fighter and more just as a support, becomes more of a support character.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
So there we go. That's our character showcase for Ares for the week.
I love that team.
Yeah. Our first comment of the week. Is there anything else we want to talk about in terms of what's going on in the world or stuff that we've been into recently?
The more I hear about Tim Walz, the more I like him.
Yeah.
Like, I love that the insult against him is supposed to be Tampon Tim, and that this is somehow, like, awful.
Yeah.
The fact that he tried to get tampons into, or he did get tampons into the men's washroom, too.
That he just got free period products in all washrooms in schools. Yeah. So that's men's washroom, but boys' washrooms really at that age.
Boys. Yeah, but I mean, the practical thing is really, so they're not going to have so much turnover, but there are times where if one washroom is out, you get it from another washroom.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the kind of outrage over free, basically washroom products.
Yeah.
Like, when was the last time you went into a washroom and there was no toilet paper and
Yeah. The clear reason why people are trying to make this a thing is it's supposed to be an acknowledgement on some level of transgender people, right? And so the sort of disgust or confusion with it is, Tim is pandering to sort of the woke left and trans kids. And I bet Tim would love it if there was like trans kids in those washrooms, if there was so-called, boys. And like, it's terrible rhetoric, right?
Right.
But
you don't even need to go there to justify it. It's a weird thing, right? Like, you have to create that problem in your mind to argue against it.
There's sort of layers of ridiculousness to it. And I think it's another one of those things where if you are not like terminally online, really deep in that sort of like right-wing pipeline, if you are just a normal person, you go, if you don't really know, or your first thought isn't about transgender people, you go, can't imagine a lot of boys need tampons, right? Or if you don't think about transgender people, you're like, boys don't need tampons, right?
Right.
But it's at its worst, it's kind of like a who cares,
right? Exactly.
It's even if you are, and to be clear, I think this is wrong. If you're the kind of person who's like, oh, well, any exposure to any sort of queerness is going to make a bunch of kids realize that they're queer. First off, not true. I mean, it might help people realize more easily with a lot less inner turmoil. And I will say that there is a non-zero number of people who might just be and present heterosexual. They might get into a straight relationship, whatever. They might think it because they don't realize there's other choices, right? So there is a non-zero number of people who would end up different if they grow up in a world where they are aware that it's a choice and it's not stigmatized and whatever. So I think, to be fair, it's not that it would never happen to anybody, but like, nobody's forcing it on kids, right? And at the basic level, I think like, I kind of think it's a mild good, right? To have tampons in the boys' washrooms in like schools.
Sure.
And it's a massively marginal good, right? Like, I think that it's very unlikely that there is a significant benefit provided by it, but functionally, it's much easier to just put tampons in any place where there's toilets, right?
Exactly.
So, like, the off chance that it makes a queer trans kid feel more comfortable in their space, or gives the opportunity for a dude to go in and get a tampon for like a classmate who needs one or something like that. It's
a marginal benefit.
There are these little moments that I can imagine it doing actual good. But in the vast majority of cases, it kind of doesn't matter at all, and it's just easier.
Yeah, but I think the tack of calling it weird to argue against it is a good one, because it really is a weird kind of argument to get all knotted up and in a lather about something that's really not a big deal. Like I said, the more I hear about him, more I like him. I think he seems like a good guy.
Everything that they're trying to do to attack him feels like something that doesn't need to be explained or defended or anything. I just hear that and I go, okay, that's fine. Like, the things that they're saying about him either make me feel totally neutral or slightly more positive about him. And I know that there's a certain base that they're trying to appeal to by saying these things, but from my perspective, I'm just like, none of this is even...
It doesn't move the needle.
None of it is worrying to me in the slightest. The worst part about it is knowing that they're saying these things and they're positioning them as an attack. And it's only changing how I feel about the people that I see sort of championing these. And by changing, I mean, a lot of times I kind of already know that these are not people I agree with and have like just what feel to me as very abnormal sort of perspectives.
It's that funny bit of manufactured outrage that doesn't move the needle for me at all. So yeah, you're right. What it really does is it doesn't make me feel worse about it, but it makes me better recognize, oh, these people, they're making kind of complaints, are kind of awful people. I do really hope the weirdness thing, that tact, that approach works, because I think it is so succinct and easy and cutting and accurate. I've seen threads before where people talk about how most rural people who have not been radicalized, and even conservative people, right, are fundamentally just kind of about letting people live their own lives, right? Unless you're taught to find it weird or disgusting, and they will tell anecdotes about like people that they know that are nominally conservative who will use all sorts of slurs in their language. And the fundamental idea that they're expressing is, I think, these minority groups that I'm referring to with a slur, right? Should be allowed to live their lives and do whatever, right? Where their language might not be right. Their perspective is relatively uninformed, but on a basic level, they have the human decency and respect for their fellow human being. They might not be as informed
Yeah.
But they have the decency. The decency is there.
Yeah, if you're not been whipped up into a frenzy or a real hate about it, that you go, you know, even if you kind of suck, that there's a lot of these things that, like, people who kind of suck are still better than, because they're still, like, there's a core seed of decency within them.
So this is a promise to all our viewers. If you ever bump into me, you recognize me for whatever reason from this YouTube channel or whatever, I have some really good stories that I'm not willing to discuss on air about exactly that kind of person, where they are fundamentally decent, but they've been raised in a very bigoted and racist world, and they will express things in an unenlightened way, an uninformed way. Yeah. But the basic decency is still there.
All the right sort of core orientation towards the world and other people, and all the wrong words and education leading up to sort of the way that you talk about it.
Well, it's funny. That's why it's in real life. It's sort of a funny story, but I don't want to maybe dox myself so much if I'm going to start talking about those kind of stories.
But anyways, so there we go. A little hopeful. Our first comment of the week comes from Anonymous Master 03G. And you're getting
I'm getting notification.
You're too popular. They say, "Hello everyone, I've been playing Injustice Gods Among Us mobile since I started high school, and now I'm in college and nearly have all the characters maxed out." But
so that's like 5 years?
No, they're in college.
Yeah, they're in college.
They started in high school.
It could be since I started high school.
Oh, since I started high school. Yeah.
So that's like 4 years somewhere around there. So not maybe the full 10 years.
Can you graduate high school early?
I guess you could. So I'm saying, I'm making an educated guess. Like ballpark, we're talking about like 4 or 5 years.
And it could take somebody much longer to graduate high school.
But probably not 10 years.
And we just don't know how deep they are in college.
Right.
They would probably say almost graduating if they were almost done. And there's all sorts of lengths that high school and college can last people.
Yeah. But because of the time of year, that's been 1 year of college, right? Like where the summer, do colleges start in August some places?
Hey, anyways. They say, but I want to ask a quick question. When I play online, I see people with metal characters that do over 100,000 damage in their stats, which I don't think is possible, as I have Elite 7, new 52 Shazam that is maxed out level 50 and only does 92k damage, and whilst I'm playing online, I see some people's metal new 52 Shazams and other metal characters doing like 116k damage or more, which I don't understand. Can someone please tell me how people increase their metal character stats so high? It would really help me have more of a chance online.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential reasons. It's hard to know without seeing your account, and I guess it's hard for us a little bit because as far as talking specific numbers, we haven't maxed out any of our metal characters.
Yeah.
It has never seemed like a good use of resources to. I mean, we're sitting on a ton of nth metal. To buy the packs and get copies, but as far as keeping their stats in line with the other teammates to make playing not non-metal characters with metal characters.
Yeah.
If you watch our channel, you know that we do not subscribe to the idea of having an unbalanced team. I'm sure there's lots of opportunities for it and lots of reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
I like the sandbox perspective.
It gives you the maximum flexibility, if not necessarily like optimized for the pure like best theoretical team.
Right. Because let's say, for example, new 52 Shazam. It's got a good passive, decreasing damage for teammates.
Yeah.
So if you want to use him as a support character, if he's got higher stats than everybody else, that passive doesn't really come into play nearly as much when his teammates are a lot weaker.
But so I guess like the question is, what could explain the disparity in stats? Right.
So I pay very little attention to the stats of the opponent, so that's going to bias my answer a little bit. But I think there's a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons I don't pay attention actually is because as you go up in the ladder, your opponent's stats will scale up higher. Like they'll just be more powerful. So I worry less about when I see similar characters who have what their stats are because I know they're going to be stronger.
Yeah. I think a second reason is that just gear in general makes so much of a difference that having somebody with higher stats than you doesn't really ultimately matter, right?
Right.
It's more of your strategy and gear. So like you need to take advantage of being a human player and your thoughtfulness in putting together a team. And specifically, you know, it's sort of that combination where even if an enemy team has the exact same gear as you can exploit your gear a lot better. If you have a special 2 build, you can only use special 2, right? Yeah.
So there's a bit of ambiguity in the question too when they talk about, when Anonymous Master talks about the damage. Is that the damage on display, like the attack stat? Or is that, so this is where the limitation of not actually maxing.
Yeah, or like the number that shows up when you're actually in a fight.
Right, because I think that, I mean, I remember some discussions where people were talking about damage, and I didn't even realize some people did this, is that they turned off the damage numbers, that shows. Yeah. And I've always left them on. I guess aesthetically, you know, I understand why some people would want to do that. But the idea of not knowing the numbers sort of makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
It's also nice specifically because we record so much of gameplay that you can actually go back and look and do the math afterwards. I think like most of the time you're not paying attention to the numbers in a fight necessarily. Right. Or at least not a lot, right? It's kind of like that subconscious or barely conscious level. Right. But if we have recordings of it, that info is sometimes useful.
Those recordings actually are super useful for me when I'm looking at the breakdown of the different hits in a special 2 and how much damage they do.
Yeah.
It's one of the only reasons why I'm able to figure out the proportion of damage that comes from each one. Mm-hmm. And that has it influences what I want to do and how I use characters, because characters that have a really weak beginning or really weak end hit of their special 2, it makes a difference. Like, you'd be surprised at how much of a difference it makes. And knowing that, and a lot of times you can't see the damage if it's knocking out an opponent before the last one.
Yeah.
That number either doesn't show up or shows up late enough that I can't see it properly unless I go back to watch it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it crits and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference too.
Yeah, so I mean, one easy reason that there could be this difference here is a difference in attack augmentations, right? They might have maxed it out.
Augmentations, right? Support cards.
Yeah, which is less likely, but still possible, right? You might be dealing 10% less damage if you don't have the support card for a given character.
Well, that's why it's important to sort of put the timing on that. Started high school and in college, because somebody who's been playing a lot longer
is much more likely to have that. It seems almost impossible that they don't have it at this point.
That's one of those old sort of answers, right? You just get the support cards for that character.
If you're talking about in the fight versus before the fight, it could be gear difference.
Could be. And at one point there was a lot of discussion. I can't even remember how it played out because it didn't feel like an important one. It was about defensive teams having enhanced stats, enhanced past the point of what they were. As you know, like, it's basically an equalizer. Like you were saying earlier, you have a huge advantage as a human player of taking advantage of the tendencies of the AI so that you can have a better feel for when they're going to tag out, what they're most likely to do at any given point.
Yeah.
So...
And them being unable to sort of make a really specialized character, right? Like characters that you want to tag in and out as frequently as possible and only use special 2s for is something that's really, really easy for people. And just doesn't happen with the AI. They simply don't take advantage of that.
Yeah. Another example of the AI having an advantage is that when they do a basic combo, they will finish it even if you block it. Whereas a human player, your combo will stop as soon as a hit is blocked. With a few exceptions, like some characters like Flash, for example.
Are fast enough.
Their first swipe is 2 hits.
That's true.
So you get both hits. But if a swipe only represents 1 hit or a tap represents only 1 hit, then
you kind of bounce off a little.
Right. And when they block it, the rest, nothing else engages after.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it's display errors. I know that sometimes if we're talking about the stats that show up, if anything, the stats show up a little bit lower, I think, compared to what they should have been. But... I mean, even the difference, if you look at the difference, right, between, 92, what was the question, 92K and 100K? That's not a lot. That's less than 10%, that's less than a 10% increase over your stat. And, like, honestly, shouldn't move the needle. Gears are way more important. The difference in stats should not be the reason that you lose the fight.
Yeah. So those are a couple things that we could look at. And ultimately we don't know, right? I guess you could get back to us and see that, but this is one of those things that we just pay less attention to because it feels like it doesn't matter as much to us.
Yeah.
Right.
And whatever the reasons are, they just are. Like, they happen anyways. I don't know that there's a way you can fix it anyways. So
Yeah.
I've never, I mean, to me, that's sort of a life kind of advice is basically, there's going to be tons of stuff in your life you can't control. And there's going to be sometimes there's a small amount that you can. So the answer isn't to give up and use that as an excuse. The answer is, well, the stuff you can control, and control it as much as you can.
Yeah.
And it'll still give you the best chance of success.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. This is a larger lesson.
I think so. I think it's an important one. And it can save you a lot of aggravation and stress.
Mm-hmm. For the next comment from people, we've got a couple sort of related ones about nostalgia a little bit.
Recently, is it the time of like the life cycle of the game? It feels like there's a lot of comments just like in the last couple weeks about this.
I don't know. It might be that we're kind of in a transitional period right now, right? People are potentially going back to school or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
That there's a seasonal component to it. But anyways, Nathan Bala 3829 says, just got back into the game a few weeks ago after 5 years dormant. Love that there's still content and a community for this. Doge's home videos. 1468.
Home
anyways,
videos.
Said, I used to watch these videos a lot as a kid. I'm glad you guys are still active. And then Juan Chicorleone says, I can't believe this game is still alive in the community, the Nostalgia Man. And yeah, so you threw these together.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because my perspective is a different one than most people. I actually play a lot more word games than straight video games.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few that I play, but I play it a lot.
Yeah. You kind of only need one.
You only need one, but it's interesting to me that, and I don't know how much of this is true with other games, but there's clearly an appeal to this game that is way more lasting and stronger and more powerful than it probably should be on the surface, right? So yeah, you've got the characters that have a built-in kind of nostalgia. The gameplay is pretty good. I wouldn't call it, it's not downloadable content, but sort of the extra online content. The interaction is surprisingly good given that you're not actually playing against other people.
Yeah.
The community that exists is one that we create for ourselves. There's not much. If you could not sit around and talk about this with other people, I think it would be a lot less enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I think it's a shame that there's, it's like when there's each year of fashion or cars or whatever that they feel the urge to do something new. I know that
disposable.
Yeah, I know. Like appliances, they would come up with different colors for each new season, right? To try to generate more.
One thing that Apple does actually specifically with their iPhones is that they release sort of a basic color scheme at the start of the year. And then because they do yearly models, halfway through the cycle, they introduce a bunch of cool, wacky colors. And that's how they sort of motivate people to buy the phone still halfway in between one run and the next run.
Right. Instead of waiting just for the next one because they're getting close to the new model.
And that's sort of, I mean, this is the extra level of technical, but that's sort of how they take advantage the best out of the economies of scale, because every subsequent phone to make costs a little bit less than the last one. Just because of all the R&D money that you put into it, and then all of the sort of like spinning up the production line, any production differences and all of that stuff. So it works out to, essentially every subsequent phone is cheaper. So the longer that you can have a cycle for your phone, and the more that you can sell the same model, the cheaper they get.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the point I was sort of dancing around a little bit is this is such a good game. I wish they could have found a way to maintain the audience, to continue the kind of support, like to make enough money off ads or in-game purchases or whatever, that they could have kept it going, because there's something there to me that's so good. But again, what do I know? I played this one game. So I'm sure there's lots of other games that are just as good and have just as much enduring appeal, but it feels like to me that maybe there's something special here that the developers are losing out on or missing out on.
I think it's interesting because games are such a commodity, right? like ultimately they are a product and they trade in big numbers. As far as a media entertainment product, games are one of the biggest, right?
Yeah.
And they have some of the biggest budgets. I think I haven't secondary verified this, but the most recent GTA, like the upcoming one that's going to be coming out, I think next year or later this year, has apparently like a rumored development cost of like $2 billion, which would make it, I think, maybe the most expensive media thing ever made, at like period, by like a pretty good margin. And so I think what's interesting is that on one level, they're very sort of consumer products. And then on the second level, they mean a lot to people. And there are so many good games, and I think how much they mean to people is, influenced for sure by quality and how good it is. But a lot of it is influenced by community and what you bring to it. And so, most of what Injustice means to us is probably this YouTube channel, right? The vast majority of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think people, have these stories or memories of making friends over games and finding community over games and stuff like that. Yeah. And so, from a consumer level, I think probably the natural life cycle of any game is you trade off of that sort of initial surge. You try to get as much money out of it when it makes sense. And even if it would continue to be profitable to have like a developer keep working on this, for example, it's probably more profitable for that same number of man hours to be dedicated to something new, right? To buy new lottery tickets on getting another surge of popularity and stuff like that.
And it may be that it's not, but if there's enough of a corporate belief, like this goes back to some of the ways that I've read about how when they make movies, that the suits have an undue amount of influence on the product that you finally see.
Yeah.
Not because they actually know anything, but because they have a belief about something. And then you just mess around with it.
Yeah. And, maybe on average, actually, like reallocating those work hours is less profitable. But if you happen to get lucky, right? If you are, the next big thing, then it's massively, massively more profitable for whatever reason, right? I think from a financial standpoint, whether it's real or just expected, it makes sense for people to wind down support and go work on something else, with maybe the exception of some indie games. I think there are some indie developers who see so much love and support for a project that they're willing to just keep working on it and making that their sort of baby, because they don't need to chase massive amounts of money. They just need to chase enough money for them to live comfortably, and then they really do it just because they love it. But I think it is interesting, this sort of uneven relationship to stuff, where especially when you're part of a bigger company, I think you're not allowed to have that same amount. Like, you maybe have a lot of love and care or whatever, but it's less, it's a little bit your baby, but it's the decisions behind working on it end up being a lot more sort of corporate and external. And so I think the games as a commodity and games as like something that people really love and mean a lot to them create this like interesting sort of push and pull in this interesting dynamic.
So that ownership, right, that you're talking about, I mean, that's sort of the definition of work for hire, where you are a hired gun, you come in and you do this stuff and you work on property, and you might have a emotional stake in it, but you clearly don't have an ownership stake in it.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to the numbers that you're throwing out, so I didn't realize, I mean, $2 billion for GTA. So, and you say GTA and it made me think Greater Toronto Area. Yeah. It took me a minute to figure out that you're talking Grand Theft Auto. So the wild thing to me is that video games used to occupy such a small niche in the area of entertainment that I can still remember a time, I think Ishtar was considered such a huge failure because at the time, and I'm going to make something up because I'm probably remembering it wrong, but that it was considered the biggest movie failure because of how little it generated, but also at the time it cost a lot to make. It was something like, I don't know, like $90 million. And I can also remember the big sort of hullabaloo when a movie cost more than $100 million to make.
Yeah.
And because the threshold for a hit movie used to be 100 million. So if you're spending that much already, if it's not some massive hit, then the studio's losing money. So it's just funny. It's funny and interesting to me, the kind of ways that things have scaled up, because what we're talking about now is 20 times the budget of a $100 million movie. And the thing is, I mean, I'm old enough now. $100 million is not even that big anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've looked it up just for sourcing, just because I am like a research kind of guy. I will say that different sources have different claims. I don't see a clear originator of the claim.
Right.
So some people say, sources say that the budget could be $2 billion. Some places say that analysts estimate the to-be-released cost at $2 billion, including marketing and other expenses.
Oh, that's huge.
So
marketing is a big part of it.
It's not clear who exactly is making that claim. It has been sort of repeated by different relatively trustworthy sources, such as the BBC. But to be clear, these kinds of guesstimates get into a lot of trustworthy sources, and there's no sort of OG originator of, like, there's nobody I see who's saying, I think it cost $2 billion and here's why. There's a lot of people saying, people have said it cost $2 billion.
Oh,
right?
The way that Trump says, I've heard people say. Yeah. There was a guy who was telling me, and he was crying afterwards as he was telling me, and I was at a coffee shop, and he said...
there is a video that looks like it's a 3-minute and 25-second one that might be doing a breakdown, but I don't know. It's not like a verified
I mean, you don't know that these people actually have any real insight that other people, or access to information that other people don't have.
Yeah.
Like a real insider.
But it is likely that it cost a massive amount of money. I think there's definitely games like that have their costs like verified at like the hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's both a shocking number, but like not entirely surprising and not entirely out of nowhere, right?
Right.
Given that we expect this is like the Grand Theft Auto series is one of the biggest in the world. They've been working on this for a very long time, right?
Right.
I would believe most numbers,
right?
As long as they're big enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think that is an alright place to end it off for
me. I would have liked to got to more questions. There's a few questions that have been sitting. There's one from Jaguar King and one from Andrew Webe.
Yeah.
That I've been itching to get to, but I think we're out of time, and we're still going to be around.
For sure, yeah. So to finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our wonderful, lovely patrons on Patreon. Truly the best of all of us. People who give us money. Anyways, the huge thanks to...
Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi 127, Nora Klimek, and Paolo-Cesar-Pablo-Juan, who are supporting us on the credited level. 5x5, who's supporting us on the gratitude level.
So there we go. And thank you so much to all of the rest of you, the riffraff, for watching and supporting us however you do. We'll see you next time. Komoda. You didn't say it.
Komoda.
There we go.
You caught me by surprise.
Yeah.